He never once said, "I love you." But every tick of that pocket watch he left behind was his silent way of saying it. That thought landed like a stone in my chest the moment I opened the drawer and found it empty. The pocket watch, my father's, gone. It was a Tuesday morning, early September. The kind of morning where the sunlight slants through the windows just right, soft and golden, like it knows summer's ending. I was in the middle of packing up the house. My house. The one I'd shared with Mary for 47 years before she passed. The one I was about to leave behind for a modest little apartment at Brookside Pines, a retirement community with wide hallways, bingo nights, and doctors on call. It wasn't the future I pictured, but stairs had become mountains. The silence had become loud. And my doctor had said the phrase that always makes a man feel about 12 years old again. You shouldn't be living alone anymore. So I was packing, one room at a time, until I opened the top drawer of my nightstand and felt the floor vanish beneath me. The cloth was still there, a piece of Dad's old apron, frayed at the edges. But the watch wasn't. I stood frozen for a minute, staring at that empty space like maybe it was just playing a trick on me. I rifled through the drawers, then the closet, then the coat pockets, then the boxes already taped shut. My heart started pounding harder than it had in years. That watch wasn't just a thing. It was him. My father, Harold Reynolds, wasn't the kind of man who hugged you goodnight. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you" or "I love you." But he handed me that watch one bitter December morning when I was 36. Just pressed it into my palm, nodded once, and went back into his workshop. No explanation, no speech, and somehow that said more than words ever could. He'd been gone nearly 4 decades now. We were never close, not really. He was precise, reserved, like one of his timepieces. I spent my entire childhood trying to make him notice me, understand me. But he was a man of routine, of silence, of screws and springs and rhythm. Never warmth, never softness. And yet, that pocket watch was the one thing I always kept near. Through every move, every loss, every milestone, I'd wind it once a week. Not because I needed the time, but because I needed him. Now it was gone. Had I packed it in the wrong box? Donated it by accident? Had someone taken it? Or was this the universe's way of saying let go? I sat down on the bed, cloth in hand, memory swirling. I could almost smell the machine oil from his workshop, hear the faint clicking of clocks on every surface. Something inside me said this wasn't over. Not yet. So I did something I hadn't done in over 50 years. I decided to go back to Milltown, Pennsylvania, the place where I was born, the place I swore I'd never return to after leaving home at 18. Back to the quiet little town where my father had fixed watches, repaired hearts he never touched, and lived and died without ever really letting me in. Maybe I was chasing a watch. Maybe I was chasing a ghost. Either way, I had to go. Milltown looked almost the same, like it had been preserved in amber. The barber shop still had its striped pole spinning lazily out front. The diner on the corner still served burnt coffee and 2 sweet pies. And the old clock tower over the courthouse still rang out every hour on the hour, off by only 5 seconds, like it always was. I parked outside what used to be Reynolds Timepieces, my father's watch repair shop. But now the sign read Milltown Antiques and Curiosities. The bell over the door gave the same soft chime as it did when I was a boy. That sound alone made my throat tighten. Behind the counter stood a woman, mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. "I'm just looking," I said, stepping slowly across the creaky wood floor. My father used to own this place. Her eyes lit with recognition. "Harold Reynolds?" Oh, we hear his name around here more than you'd think. People still bring in stories about him. She paused. You must be Walter. I blinked. How'd you? There's a photograph of you two in the back room. I found it tucked in an old repair ledger. My heart caught. Do you still have it? She nodded and disappeared for a moment, then returned with a black and white photo, faded, creased. A boy of maybe 10 standing awkwardly beside a tall man with wireframe glasses. His hand rested lightly on the boy's shoulder. I swallowed hard. I don't remember this. There's more, she said, handing me a yellowed envelope taped behind the frame. Inside was a clipping from the Carnegie Mellon Chronicle, one of my college articles from decades ago. Folded carefully. Preserved. He kept this? I whispered. She nodded. There's a box of other things too. I've been meaning to sort through them. You're welcome to take a look. She led me into the back. Dusty shelves, stacked boxes, and the soft hum of silence. I dug through watch parts, handwritten tags, little envelopes with broken gears. Then I found it. A small red bicycle reflector. I stared at it for a long time before memory snapped into place. It was the night before my SAT exam. My bike chain had snapped during my paper route. I'd been distraught, panicked even. I needed that bike the next day to get to school early for prep. The next morning, the bike was fixed. The reflector had been reattached. The chain cleaned, oiled, quiet as ever. I never knew who fixed it. I assumed maybe my neighbor. But it was him. Dad. I never said thank you. I didn't know. I sat there in the dim light, the photograph in one hand, the reflector in the other, feeling like someone had just handed me back my childhood, reframed. He was there, all along, just not the way I expected. He didn't say the words. He built them, tick by tick, gear by gear, gesture by gesture. And I had been too hurt to see it. I tucked the items carefully into my bag. I thanked Linda and stepped back outside into the golden afternoon. The courthouse clock struck 3. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone. The flea market had always been a quiet pulse in Milltown, a place where time moved slower, like everything there understood it had already lived through enough. I wasn't planning to stop. I didn't think the answer would be there. But some part of me, maybe the part that had held on to that watch for all these years, told me to take a walk through it anyway. Vendors were folding up tables, stacking crates, chatting lazily as the sun began to tilt westward. My eyes wandered, more from habit than hope. But then something caught the edge of my vision, something small, silver, and painfully familiar. It was lying in an open velvet case on a table cluttered with vintage jewelry, rusted pocket knives, and a few old compasses. But this wasn't like the others. I knew it by heart. My father's watch. I froze. Everything around me seemed to hush. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears. My legs moved on their own, carrying me toward it. I reached out, fingers trembling, afraid I was about to touch a ghost. Something catch your eye? The vendor asked. He was an older man, perhaps mid-60s, with a kind face and a quiet voice. I picked up the watch, holding it like it might fall apart. My thumb brushed the worn metal, the tiny dent near the edge. Yes, that same dent. I remembered it clearly now, from when I dropped it on the garage floor 20 years ago. Where did you get this? I asked, barely above a whisper. He rubbed the back of his neck. Guy came through a while back. Sold me a box of timepieces, mostly junk. This one, well, I liked the feel of it. Didn't think it actually worked. It was mine, I said. It belonged to my father. I've been looking for it. The man studied my face, then looked down at the watch in my hand. You know, he said softly, I had a feeling. There's something about that one, feels like it still carries a story. I turned the watch over, slowly, reverently. And there it was. I had never noticed it before. How had I never noticed it? Engraved faintly on the back. To my son, who makes time worth keeping. For a moment, I just stared. It was like someone had reached into my chest and cracked something open. I swallowed hard. This wasn't here before. Maybe you weren't ready to see it, the man said. His words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't wrong. For so long, I'd carried a version of my father in my head, a man made of silence, of discipline, of distance. But here he was, etched in silver, whispering through time. To my son. He had loved me, maybe in the only way he knew how. Quiet, precise, permanent. I'll pay whatever you want for it, I said. He shook his head. Keep it? It was never mine. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, whispered thank you, and walked away before my throat closed up completely. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed, the watch in my hand, ticking softly. I held it to my ear like I used to as a boy. Tick, tick, tick. Each beat felt like a piece of him. A conversation we never had. I reached into my bag and pulled out the reflector from earlier, the photograph, the article clipping. One by one, I laid them out on the nightstand like puzzle pieces. My childhood, my manhood, my regrets. I finally understood. All these years, I thought he didn't see me, that he didn't care. But he watched me. He kept me, quietly, reverently, like one of his most delicate timepieces. I opened my notebook and began to write. Words poured out faster than I could think. Not polished, not poetic, just raw, real, honest. I wrote to my father, to myself, to the little boy who had waited for a hug that never came, not realizing it had been there all along, in a fixed bicycle, a saved newspaper clipping, a carefully chosen engraving. I ended the letter with a single sentence. Thank you, Dad, for everything I never saw until now. And I slept that night deeper than I had in years. It was quiet the next morning when I stood at the threshold of my home for the last time. The moving van had come and gone. The rooms were bare, echoing with the ghosts of laughter and footsteps, of holidays and heartbreaks. The only thing I left behind was a note on the kitchen counter for the next owner. Take care of her. She took care of us for a long, long time. I placed Dad's pocket watch in my jacket pocket. Not hidden this time. Not stored away in a drawer. But close to my heart, where it always should have been. Brookside Pines wasn't glamorous, but it was warm. My room faced the garden. I could see the trees lining the path where couples walked slowly, hand in hand. There was a bird feeder outside my window, and the sun hit the curtains just right every morning. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. I set up the photograph of Dad and me on the windowsill. Next to it, I placed the reflector, polished now, still red as a fire engine. And in the center, I displayed the pocket watch, still ticking, louder than ever. A few days later, I wrote a new letter. This one was for Emily, my granddaughter, 17 years old, full of life and questions. Reminded me of myself at that age, before the silence set in. Dear Emily, one day, you'll think you understand your parents. You won't. And that's okay, because understanding doesn't always come when we want it. It comes when we're ready. This watch belonged to your great-grandfather. He was a quiet man, but he taught me something in the end. Love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just ticks. When you hear this watch, I want you to remember that even if someone doesn't say the words, they may still be loving you in the only way they know how. Keep time. Keep stories. Keep forgiving. Love, Grandpa Walt. Sealed it, slid it into the drawer beneath the watch. Someday I hope she finds it. Someday I hope it finds her when she needs it most. Now every morning I sit by the window and wind the watch. I listen to it tick as I sip my coffee. Some mornings I speak to Dad aloud. Other days I just listen, because now I know he's been speaking all along. Not with words, but with time. And that, it turns out, was always enough.